So normally Silk is here to kind of start things off, but basically, Jesse seems like he's getting his microphone fixed here. Um, we can just go ahead and chat. Aidan, you were just talking. Give us a little about yourself. What are you up to?
I just released a new AR app called Doodlelens. So I've been working on that full time now. It basically just lets you take a drawing off a paper or tablet and instantly bring it into augmented reality. You can place it in your environment, and you can also animate them just by taking multiple photos and chaining them together. So it's an interesting app. And it got some good coverage and retweets and things like that. So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Do you mind typing the name of your app into chat?
Oh, sure. How do I do that?
Is there a way to see chat when you're in VR?
Oh, yeah, I forgot you're in Oculus Quest.
Yeah. Okay, in the browser view, I can see it.
Yeah, Thomas, check out your microphone for us, man.
Sorry about that.
You're good.
I was actually trying to post the name of Aidan's app, which is really, really awesome.
Right? I think that's it.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Jim.
And then you can get it at this address if this works.
Fancy meeting you here.
Yeah, morning.
Jesse, how's that microphone going?
I don't know. I tried upping the.
That's much better.
I don't want to interrupt. Thanks for taking the hands right before I could fix my mic. What am I gonna do?
Yeah, it sounds a little distant.
It's you do sound a little bit faint, but it's better than before.
Okay.
I'm gonna mute my mic when I'm not talking because I got an echo.
Does anybody know any hacks for sounding louder? Anybody?
I'm not sure if they heard you, my man.
Oh, I'm just wondering if anybody knows any way for me. I hear myself in my headphones really well because some people aren't able to hear me. So I don't know how to solve the problem.
I think we're just going to have to get kind of intimate here. If everybody wants to kind of move to the carpet, we can all just talk really close to Jesse and we'll be able to hear him pretty well.
I think this little camera, Aidan, come closer.
Yeah. Sorry, just typing. All right.
Did we lose Marjan? What did Marjan run off to?
Oh, I can see chat in my VR headset. Okay.
We lost Marjan, I guess. So can we hear from here okay?
It's still pretty garbled, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Let me, I actually might jump to a different headset then. Let's see if that works. So give me 2 minutes.
Are you on a Wi-Fi or something too?
It's Wi-Fi, yeah, but if it's coming from the computer, I'd rather just throw on the Quest and then see,
Yeah, let's give it a shot.
All right, 1 second.
It'd be fun to be able to grab the text messages and throw them around or pin them.
I love that.
Yeah. This is my first time in WebXR, I think. This is pretty cool. Oh, look at that. Is that a message?
Yeah, Jen's doing it.
Oh my gosh, look at that. Woo!
I love it.
Wow. Whoop. Whoop. Okay. Oh, there it is. Yep.
And it's incredibly performant too with the number of people in here. It's pretty cool.
Oh, I wonder if you could draw something that then if you spun it fast enough, you could create a shape with it. Or like a piece of art. You know those spinning fan things? Oh, and someone's drawing.
Someone's doing that. I'm starting to get a few glitches with 20 people in the room.
It's still a lot.
How many people here are in VR?
I am.
Show of hands.
I'm on PC.
PC.
I find the Quest really heavy. How are people managing the weight of the Quest?
A lot of people have been talking about it.
Sorry.
Yeah, people are putting attaching a battery pack to the back strap or a counterweight to the back strap, and that seems to help redistribute the weight.
And then
Okay.
there's a strap that you can buy online. It's called the Studio Form strap. It's just like it's like a Velcro strap that you can probably jerry rig yourself if you wanted to. But they sell it online, and it actually like it feels like it's sort of like yeah it makes a bit of a difference. I would recommend. Yeah.
Okay. Wait, so what do I search for to buy online?
It's called Studio Form Oculus Quest thing strap.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thing
Okay.
strap.
I see it. Yeah, I found it. I
Okay.
found
Yeah.
it.
that's the one. Yeah.
The technical term is called thing strap.
Thanks, strap. Yep. Oh, it's
I
a
come from
deluxe
marketing,
strap.
so I have a marketing background. So yes, that's the kind of words that sell.
Yeah. Oh, it's deluxe. Yeah, that actually seems like it would be great.
Hmm. Yeah, Cass and Cherry, the YouTubers, I saw them, and then I was like, oh, that looks like it might make sense. So I took a gamble and I bought one for myself, and it actually worked out.
That's cool.
Well, Aidan has real artistic talent here.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that I don't think I can erase this. And it's kind of in the middle of everything.
All right, well, while we're waiting for Jesse, I have a question because I'm the speaker at this in 2 weeks. And I'm planning to give a talk on creation of online cultures. And I wanted to crowdsource from the audience this week if there's any questions or any type of format requests that you all have for me, because I have like 2 weeks to prepare.
I'd say
Yeah.
the main thing, we try to keep it very conversational. So,
Okay.
you know, it's really good to start with like kind of posit your position, and then from there, just, you know, try to get people to give you their opinions, and don't be afraid to poke and prod.
Okay. All right. That's good. Yeah, I've come to a couple of these before, and yeah, it tends to be super conversational, which is nice.
Yeah, I have a feeling you'll be in a pretty good space to sort of like experiment if you wanted to. Because one of the things that I thought about is like, are you like this Hubs has like the drawing tool, and you can like add like slides and pictures. Like, yeah, it's not how do you take advantage of that? You know, while also being conversational.
Oh, I'm getting an echo.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that would be a good question. Also, Jin, it looked like you posted something about formation of communities. Is that something that you would want to talk about?
No, I was wondering what the topic is.
Oh, I've been trying to get this Medium series out on blogging on these techniques for creating social norms in online communities. So it could be for VR, but there's basically these 9 techniques, these 9 building blocks of culture that come from anthropology and sociology. And I'm writing a blog series that keeps it highly focused on what this means to social VR.
That sounds cool.
Thank you. Thank you. So, I'll also try to get all of the blog posts circulating in the next 2 weeks. So that way, if people have time to read some in advance, then we could really just dive in and spend most of the time discussing.
I have a question. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. I mean, well, this is probably something you'll cover at your talk, but I'm curious. Like, where are you discovering the sort of like the fundamental differences between like in a space where people interact in a social VR space versus real world? Like, let me give you an example. The other day I was at a party, and at this party, one of the icebreakers they had me do was like find a stranger and stare into their eyes for 5 minutes straight without saying anything.
That is just
And
so creepy.
There was literally no face that I could make that would make me seem less creepy. The whole time I was super uncomfortable. But in VR, I can stare at this robot for 5 minutes straight, and I don't feel. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry,
exactly. Well, like in Second Life, I can cam in on another avatar. I can right click inspect to see what they're wearing and what store it's from, and I could do all kinds of stuff I would never do in real life.
Yeah.
That's just creepy.
Yeah. Needless to say, the silent party after that was really good, but
I
that
bet.
icebreaker did not do it for me.
That's it's a very interesting party.
Yeah.
Your friends sound cool. I mean, fundamentally, like as a social scientist, I don't see huge differences in how online cultures are formed compared to in-person, like physical reality cultures. I think that humans are influenced by the same things in both scenarios. And so I always start from the point of view of humans are the same. And so I think that these techniques for culture building and for social norms that are like these things that are used to establish them, like the role of heroes, the role of symbols, the role of language, the role of stories, I think that those translate completely from one medium to the next.
I think the interesting difference as I see it is that usually in reality we have one environment setting up all our expectations of reality and all the stories and family and things like that, and then you come into virtual worlds, whether you're playing World of Warcraft or even VR, and all of a sudden you could participate in potentially hundreds of thousands of different lore, stories, things like that, that especially with VR can feel as vivid as reality. I think it will give us a chance to like explore all different parts of ourselves and have like a relationship with the environment that's more voluntary. And we can be shaped by thousands of environments, which to me sounds kind of amazing, just like the internet did for most of us or many of us.
Yeah. I mean, that's like a beautiful, like optimistic, like ideal of like how VR could be used. Like I love that. Like I know, like I don't always have a reputation of being the most positive person about social VR, but I totally agree with you, Aidan. Like that's like that is a beautiful world I would love to live in. Multiple worlds.
Yep. But it has to be shaped correctly because, as we see with the internet, it can become the thing that divides us more than connects us, and that's
Yes.
problem
Yeah.
translates directly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, really quickly, can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Oh yeah, Jesse. Sorry, I didn't realize you were back.
No, I'm super appreciative that you took the reins there, and I was enjoying the conversation. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't sitting here and it still wasn't working.
While you're at it, I just wanted to make sure my audio was working. Is
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yep.
Great.
Well, let's pick up right where this conversation was going. Both Marjan and Aidan, from like completely different ends of the spectrum, I think, have really interesting perspectives on this. And Aidan, you've been sort of sharing, but like, how are artists kind of working in the context of immersive technologies right now to create worlds that are both inclusive, but also worlds that are not just inclusive, but also not divisive. So that we fracture off like the way that we've seen kind of happen because of the web 3.0.
That's like a really tough one because with me it's like I sometimes feel like I was doing the mixed reality hacks on the internet since 2016, and I had some of them were heavily engaged in anti-capitalist dialogue. Some of them were addressing the over-financialization and commodification of the art world. And and some of them had gone viral, but much to my amazement and surprise, I wasn't getting trolled. And then I started to do the feminist pieces, and it's like they came out of the woodwork. So to me, it's like fascinating. It's sort of like the second I do feminist work, it's like I'm like some kind of like fly strip or something for the trolls, but it was like perfectly like I did Pussy Fights Back at Art Basel right after the 2016 election, and I was not trolled by any Trump supporters. But the
Can you, by
second
the way,
I
really
did
quickly tell
feminist
people
work,
what that was?
yeah. Well, I guess I'll just do an intro. I'm a digital artist and animator, and you know, I always say my first computer animation was done on a Commodore 64 back in 1984. So I've done lots of different bodies of work over the course of the years. I work primarily with 3D CG, and you know, in a distinct style that I have and that I'm known for. And starting in 2016, I started to hack my artwork and my critical discourse into found and shot footage of exhibitions on Instagram. And so these look like very realistic mixed reality hacks. And so initially, my idea was to expand the possibilities for a digital exhibition, and then it was also to engage in an intervention with a critical discourse that I saw missing from art exhibition. And I felt that the technology was uniquely qualified to facilitate the type of intervention that my critical discourse required. And I've also done lots of augmented reality apps and pieces in galleries and museums for actually curated exhibitions, not hacked into them. So that's just like a little bit of the background. And right after the election, yes, I put a flaming color cycled pussy as Pussy Fights Back at Art Basel, Miami. And so, like I'm saying, there were almost no Trump trolls, none. But in the last year and a half, when I started with the Glitch Goddess hack, which were all without exception feminists, and if you go and read the comments, you'll see it's just like they literally come out of the woodwork. So it's interesting because the divisions are there. And I think that the reason the divisions are there, and I think this is something I brought up in the panel we just did with Jesse, also that to a large extent, all of these technologies, AR, VR, and social media as well, are really about the sort of like aggregated.
Oops.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Can I
she's
ask
right
what
now-
the panel was?
Oh yeah, it was virtual art in the real world at XR for Change, which I moderated with Marjan and Nancy Baker Cahill and Sugwen Chong and Jen Perlin, like a lot of really sort of smart, carry able, like people that are really kind of doing cool stuff around like how do you integrate virtual and augmented art. While we're waiting for her to come back, I'll kind of dial back to what should have happened in the beginning had I not had audio issues. My name's Jesse Damiani. I'm the Deputy Director of Emerging Technology at SNU. Some of my team members are actually here via desktop over here to the left, so everybody could, if they have hands, wave to them, say hi.
And what does SNHU stand for? I'm sorry.
Oh, Southern New Hampshire University.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep, of course. Thanks for asking. And I also curate festivals and immersive art events. And so when Silke and I were talking, one thing that I really wanted to kind of bring into this space was the way that artists are really defining what some of these, defining and contributing to what some of these languages of interaction are and what they'll be. Marjan's work, everybody should really go look at, and a lot of you probably have actually seen it already. When she said the Glitch Goddess, if you've seen these really sort of beautiful metallic sort of AR sculptures that are morphing between different expressions of what femininity has been or could be, you know, both referential and also looking toward the future, and placing those in, as she said, actual exhibitions where she's been solicited and they want her work there, and then exhibitions where her work it sort of stands in contrast. Like there was one thing she did that was she put her work at an exhibition that was called History of the Nude, which left out. I'll let her tell more, but it left out some sort of key aspects of what sort of a perspective of the nude would be. So she has some really cool perspectives on that. So hopefully she'll be back to be able to share that with us. But we also have Aidan, who just came out with Doodlelens, another thing that a lot of you have probably seen. And Aidan, if you already kind of prepped them on all this, I'm sorry for repeating, but essentially it allows you to use your phone or tablet to grab physical drawings that you make in the world, little doodles you make, and bring those into augmented reality and to animate them there. So kind of totally different end of the spectrum, but equally really powerful in terms of what it could do, and different languages it could sort of instigate in society as we move forward. So I guess, Aidan, going back to that last question, how are artists and how are you seeing artists using this new platform as a way to create inclusivity and maybe like move away from some of the divisions that have kind of plagued us over the past half decade
Yeah.
or so?
Yeah, I think even to build off Marjan is, I think one way to make people care about their space, whether it's virtual or real, is to invest in it, to create, to be part of the shaping of it, to make it a better place for them and for everyone else. And one thing that I'm kind of obsessed about is how do you get more people involved in that creation? How do you make it more accessible? To me, it can't just be left off to like people who know how to program and people who know how to draw. I think you should just be able to doodle and all of a sudden have something kind of compelling come out of the other side. And going back to my childhood, making games and cities and whatever else with just paper and a pen, it would be interesting if anyone could just sprawl out some paper, some markers at school or at home, and all of a sudden start creating a world for their friends to join into, to share with the world, to be part of that bigger community. Just with some simple tools. Obviously, you still need a smartphone that knocks out a good amount of people, but at the same time, that's going to get even more accessible. So I think that's where I come from on that side. I'm obsessed with making creation and enabling creation for everyone.
And what have you been seeing? Because it's been fun watching the way the community responded to Doodlelens. Like it kind of went from this like pet project that you'd been kind of making in the basement to like really, really visible, like visible outside our community. And just from the things I've seen you and some of the people in your circle resharing, like there's a lot of creativity kind of flourishing. Like what are you seeing kind of rise up as like things people are using the app for?
Yeah, even at the point of how many people saw it, it was like I even needed to integrate Instabug or Instabug, whatever it is. And I called them and they were like, "Hey, we just saw that tweet. That's crazy that you're going to integrate like our service." And I was like, "How did so many people end up seeing it?" But onto the question, it's what I'm seeing that's most exciting to me is kind of like a disposition to start world building. I'm seeing people creating characters, placing them, all of a sudden a little town appears. The combination of elements ends up creating these like little worlds, like these, in a way, like maybe the way that we want the world to look, if we had a choice, kind of thing. Like one person, it was a cute lemonade stand in a newspaper. I think this is Lily Ooms. If I pronounced it correctly, she's a great artist. And all of a sudden, she created just this peaceful environment. She played some nice music over it, and it just was like this super friendly, happy town square to walk through. And I just really love that. That to me is when I saw that video during the beta, I was just like, okay, this is, and I didn't even think this would be the app to do it. So yeah, that's what I've seen, a lot of world building.
Yeah. Very cool. That actually segues back. Marjan, how's your audio? Are you back with us?
Yeah,
Cool.
it's unfortunately I'm in a remote wilderness area on vacation, so I'm going to drop in and out. But right now, it's
Unfortunately.
pretty stable. Yeah.
Well, we've got you while we've got you. So while we've got you, you were kind of midstream, kind of giving some background on yourself and the way that your work like hasn't been trolled in certain contexts and all that.
Yeah. So
it's
to me, it's kind of interesting because there are divisions that I think are hardwired, and when they get triggered, they get triggered. And to what extent can the technology overcome that? I mean, I don't know.
Why do you think you're not being trolled in those contexts?
Most likely because of the metrics, because the majority of the people who were looking at that work were not necessarily Trump supporters, let's say, or people who would feel strongly enough about defending late stage crony capitalism to, let's say, troll me. But
Mm.
I think it's a reflection of the fact that people who look at digital art or CG art, there's probably a greater number of people who might have issues with feminist work.
So you think?
Maybe that's it. So in
Do
other
you
words,
think
it's a
maybe as
reflection of
more
the metrics.
people? Go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's probably a reflection of the metrics.
Got it. So then the question becomes, and this is sort of to both of you, like, what's going to happen? Like, we're sort of at this precipice moment where a lot more people, that we're going to start seeing more non-Pokemon Go apps that people actually like to use. And we're actually seeing this obviously with Snapchat and TikTok, where and Instagram, like this sort of explosion of filters and lenses. Like, people are starting to integrate AR and art-driven experiences into their sort of daily sort of routines. How is that going to change? Like, I assume that your suspicion, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, is that right now the metrics are because you're doing this sort of art event in an art venue among a population that wants to see that type of thing. But as we progress, lots more people are going to end up seeing it, and maybe the trolling does start. Is that a safe assumption to
Yeah,
make?
actually, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up because, like, the particular feminist hack that the glitch goddess at Art Basel Miami, I mean that had about 3 million views, and on all these other art channels, on each one it had like 1 million views. So that's a really good point. That because there was such a huge, like there were so many people looking at it. Yeah, with that sort of wider audience came the trolls. So actually, that's a good point.
In, and maybe in my kind of overview of the internet, it seems that trolling is effective or conductive when there's a lack of dialogue or the ability to have a dialogue, whether it's just two people on extreme sides of a spectrum of some topic. What would be interesting is more in how do we shape events, apps, anything that can be communicated through in a way that
Right.
has both sides of the spectrum contributing in an equally creative or positive way, rather than leaving room for the need to respond in a negative way. I don't know if that's totally possible with what you're doing, but it seems to me it would be interesting to leave room for both sides of the conversation and see what happens. So the trolls
Yeah,
look bad to both.
yeah, no, I mean, but you know, that's to a large extent that's sort of built into to the um, to the setup because you know once again we're dealing with what I call technologies of the human imagination, and so you know your imagination is bound to take over it, and I think that you know one of the interesting comments that the trolls made on the glitch goddess of art of Miami and it was that he said, "Well, why did you have to ruin such a beautiful piece of digital art with a feminazi voiceover?" That was the actual comment.
Yeah.
And so I mean, you know, he's coming out of the gate with this is a feminazi thing. I mean, you know, it's in other words, he's coming out. He's not even looking. I mean, this is like a completely triggered, you know, kind of a phenomenon here. He's not even dealing with the work or me or anything else. He's just reacting, you know, to whatever it is that he reacts to. So I think to a large extent that's built in. It's built into any situation where I mean, if you throw people from all over the world, all points of view, all races, ethnicities, age groups, etc., if you throw that much diversity into an intimate context where communication is taking place, you're bound to have reactions. There's no way around it. That's just human nature. And I think to expect the technology to sort of overcome that human nature, I mean, I don't know if it can overcome it, but it can mediate it. And I think the goal should be mediation rather than, you know, denying the human condition. You know?
So how, as an artist, are you thinking through? We lost Aiden, everybody. I'm sure he'll find his way back. I love being in emerging technology, by the way, and like we're still kind of navigating all these little very sort of old school dilemmas like audio and connectivity. But as an artist who's contributing in this community in the early days, like what decisions are you making around the impact of your work when it progresses to like maker DIY culture, the way we've seen, like the way, Etsy and Instagram have propped up artists that never would have made the fine art establishment. Oh, we got Aidan back. Cool.
Yes, sorry, I internet went out right in the middle of what you're saying. I'm sorry.
You're all good. Well, so opening this question up to both of you, Marjan as an artist, and then Aidan, you as a platform creator, just wondering what decisions you're making in advance of kind of a more mainstream augmented audience, an audience familiar and willing to treat augmented reality apps with the same sort of like, honestly mundanity that you treat any 2D app on your phone.
Right.
Well,
Go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll go.
We can. I think there's a lag. Or for what I work on, especially with platforms, I think just the first thing that comes to mind is just protecting kids and what they see, just as a baseline for anything. And then on top of that, I think that as long as people have the ability to filter what they want to see and what they want to hear effectively in a way that doesn't even have that hopefully that negative first reaction. I think that's the kind of platforms that I like to participate in and also like to build. I think you should have the ability to filter, but it shouldn't necessarily be filtered for you. I think every type of room should be able to exist in any kind of conversation, but your participation in it should be safe, whether that's filtering things and anything like that. Yeah, I don't know if that answers it well, but
sure. Marjan?
Yeah, I don't I don't I don't know. I take a highly sort of spontaneous stream of consciousness to my modeling and animation technique, and that's kind of how I've arrived at the look and style that I've arrived at. So I don't think I literally try to sort of tap into my unconscious and arguably collective unconscious and to sort of mine that for my artistic practice and work. So there's always obviously a personal dimension to what I'm doing, but there's also this sort of like what I call a global dimension, because there is this sort of unconscious that is common to all of us as the collective unconscious. So a lot of the ideas that I deal with have this sort of multiple dimensions to it. Yes, there's the personal dimension, but then there's a dimension of what is happening right now. And so I'm not a huge fan. That's my approach. So I'm not approaching what I'm doing as it has a certain audience or it doesn't, or whether it's appropriate for children or not. I just don't deal with those ideas. And I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't deal with those ideas. I'm just saying that's not the kind of art practice I have. And I do believe there's different paths as art practices go. And so I don't expect other people to have the same approach. But I think we need a diversity of approaches. And like mine is really about letting go and surrendering and seeing what comes out and trusting that process.
Amazing. Chris, I think you had a question, unless your controller was glitching.
Yeah, I did have a question. Thanks for catching that. Hi everyone. I just had a question about sort of like your thoughts on how will future platforms, future augmented reality platforms, where you're walking about in the real world and there's digital objects out there, like how will you think is the right way to curate the line between like something that is art and something that is indecent, like really like pornography or something. Like I don't know, like Aidan was talking about like protecting kids and stuff. Like what if there is this like public layer out there, and people are walking around it, and you can drop some pornography in it? Like is that regulated? Who regulates that? Who?
Yeah.
Where do the platforms draw the line between what is decent and what is allowed, what isn't? Yeah.
Yeah,
look at how Instagram is dealing with it already. I mean, there's an awful lot of nudity already in terms of art on Instagram. But most of it, I mean, yes, some of it is pornographic. But to be honest with you, there's more of that kind of pornographic thing on Twitter than there is on Instagram.
But here's the difference. Here's the difference. The difference here is that on the Twitter thing, I could just look at my screen and like it's just me and my screen right here. But if we're like talking about the future where it's augmented reality glasses or even phones that you put out and you're like scanning about the world, like is there a future where it sort of transcends from looking at your screen to like, oh, now someone left it in the public layer and my kid can see it.
Okay, I can actually talk about that because that's come up with from, when I was commissioned to do autonomous for, which is an augmented reality animated figure that I have, chronometric sculpture, I call it, for the Smithsonian. During the discussion, because they knew my work and they knew that I deal with nudity and sometimes sexual content. The first thing they said is that that there would be children at the museum, and we had a heavy discussion about that. And so what I delivered is the augmented reality autonomous, which was to celebrate life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So there's a figure that rises from a mask, kind of like a glitched mask, if you may. And the figure becomes self-aware. It examines itself, and then it sort of goes into this triumphant pose, if you may, as it celebrates life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And then it falls and goes through that cycle again. And the figures cycle between male and female. Now, I spent inordinately large amounts of time making sure that the male looked like a male, the female looked like a male, the female, sorry, but not in a way that would be unacceptable in terms of exposure to children. So, and to the best of my knowledge, the app was very popular. There were lots of downloads. People spent, I have like a reel of it on the internet, and you can see there was tons of kids running around, with this giant AR animated sculpture, and they were having fun. Nobody was offended. I didn't have a single complaint. So I think with mixed reality, whether it's an AR app on a phone or some type of a headset, mixed reality like Magic Leap or HoloLens, or even with VR, these technologies all require that you go through some kind of a consent wall.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I'm surfing the web and I come across it. For you to see my augmented reality app, you have to download it. So there is some degree of a consent wall, for lack of a better term, with all of these technologies when you think about it. And if the content is going to be pornographic, or it's going to contain, I don't know, sexual content or other things that people might find offensive, that should all go into the consent wall as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
Look,
Yeah,
there are museum exhibitions.
Oh.
There are museum exhibitions where before you walk into the museum, there's a sign that says, this exhibition contains nudity, da 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 da. So we already have that kind of structure, conceptually speaking, built into art exhibitions.
So one thing, I'm getting some chats as we're talking. So trying to kind of coalesce some of the thoughts that are coming up. Some people are sort of thinking through the ways that AR won't be one single public layer. It'll be many different kind of layers, verging on infinite different layers. And then the question becomes, for graphic content, does that fall to the parents to kind of know what layers that they can sort of allow or disallow their kids to use, rather than trying to censor or monitor the layers themselves? One other person also made a really interesting point. I'm sorry, by the way, I'm not able to. A bunch came up and I don't remember who said what. So thank you for sharing, and feel free to just pipe in, by the way, when there's a break. If you want to just talk, don't think of this as like super regimented thing. But also the idea of like an RSS, I'm doing air quotes, for spatial anchors, so that like particular places or art or ideas or whatever it is that have been kind of anchored somewhere, you have sort of an ongoing feed with. So I'm just kind of throwing all those things out because I think it progresses this conversation interestingly. What do you all think of that?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to cover some of the same stuff because I dropped out for about a minute, but as far as I see it, we already have municipalities, local governments, nationwide governments that kind of dictate law that decides what's okay and what's not okay to do in public. Every place is different. You're going to just see this explode, 1,000 times over with self-moderation for yourself, but also, people are going to moderate what kind of content is in your area based off of kind of a more direct democracy with everyone who's around. And as far as it goes, you'll basically have it in your system, whatever you're using, to have the world be more a reflection of you and what you like. Whether that's other people deciding what's seen and not, you'll probably have the freedom to just turn that all off and go, give me everything. I want to be able to see, any kind of content, and for everyone else, there's hierarchy of rules and ideas as specific as your own property all the way to your street, to your town. It will kind of break down the idea until it just becomes you, the individual, deciding what is good for you. And AI, big data, all that kind of stuff is actually going to help a lot with that. Obviously, we want that private and secure, but Apple collects a lot of data on you. They don't sell it, supposedly. That data is going to help decide in the future what you like, what you're comfortable seeing, your age, anything like that, and filtering content. So a lot of it's going to be automated, I think.
What happens if we can't? I mean, what happens if it's so diverse and varied, and like, pending we do get off of the kind of like sort of, Aiden, you and I are both on Quest right now. Like right now, the platform is pretty dictated by major corporations, but pending something like Hubs can take off, and Doodlelens becomes its own and all these different platforms become their own platforms that can live discreetly. I mean, is censorship something we can even really reasonably expect to happen, or will it be something sort of like a Black Mirror episode where computer vision running in the back end is a sensor in somebody's lenses, whatever they are, glasses, contacts, headsets, whatever, that basically like recognizes objects and removes them from a child's view, for instance. Like what can we? I guess I'm just sort of
That's
throwing
already
this censorship
happening,
question
though.
through,
Jesse, that's already happening. I genuinely believe that's already happening. At any given time, when, let's say, I'm looking at the news or surfing the web or hanging out on social media, I'm very much seeing combination of both machine learning and my cache and my surfing habits, if you may, determining what I'm seeing. And you could argue that's a type of censorship already. The more sophisticated the learning systems get in terms of my habits, naturally, it's the what I come into contact with is the digital versus the real. Let's say it's going to become more and more filtered. Now, the interesting question is, to what extent is that subverted and co-opted as is, and to what extent is that going to get even more co-opted and subverted? I think that's the more critical question for me, anyway.
Yeah, I think it's
actually. Go ahead.
Really quick. I think it's more important than to consider the objective of this sensor, or aka filter, and those same filters can be used to actually create more understanding. Whether it's a talk on religion, actually being able to translate what my God means or what your God means, but our principles of anything, just religion as an example. And I think that it's the more disturbing future is we both pick up a newspaper that's actually just a big QR code, and I'm seeing my news, you're seeing yours, just like kind of today, and we're trying to show each other the paper, but we can't read the same thing. We have two different opinions being told to us, kind of thing.
That's what's happening right now with people who are basically only, like, the people in the red states are only seeing like their news, and people in the and that really I mean, VR has a possibility here of being an empathy machine. Like Jeremy Bailenson writes about this, where you can kind of be a Black person and see what it's like to experience discrimination, and we have to work towards making more of those kinds of venues available to people, because we're really siloing ourselves. I have Donald Trump blocked on Twitter. It's the best decision I ever made. But I mean, the thing is that, I am not deliberately not subjecting myself to stuff that's going to raise my blood pressure.
That's an interesting point that you brought up, because a year ago this time, I had many, many, many more friends on social media blowing up over, Trump news every second of every day.
Yes.
And it's almost as if we have adapted. And I think this is something we need to understand, that as the technology evolves, we adapt to it because we are an adaptive species. So I find that really interesting that in about a year, people are already mediating their exposure to Trump, just like
Oh,
a lot of
yeah.
people. In other words, like yeah, everybody went out of got like everybody sort of had this massive reaction and became very excessive with their consumption of second to second or minute to minute Trump outrage, if you may. And then they slowly started to mediate that and pull back. So I find that it's very interesting how well we're adapting. But the question is that a good thing or a bad thing? You know,
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
sometimes what I
Yes,
think
exactly.
about.
Exactly.
I think that it's a symptom of a really bad thing. Technology, the same technology that created this division, has the ability to solve. I think even if if you dislike someone, if you hate them, if you think they're wrong, oftentimes it's really just comes down to not understanding why they make the decisions they like or they do, and also being able to just form an opinion based in kind of a truth. And a lot of the times you disagree with someone maybe because their opinions aren't based in any truth. What this technology, everything allows us to do and into the empathy machine is go into everything that we're being told in the news, what a pundit giving their opinion to us, it's Donald Trump. Can you actually zoom into what they're talking about? See all the data, see all the real facts, and also if it's something like, I mean, let's go to the border crisis because that's pretty crazy right now. Everyone's talking about it. Can you actually just go visit a facility in VR and go like, do I disagree with this? Do I not? That's good for everyone on the right. That's good for everyone on the left. And also going, what's the situation on the border? Are there thousands of people coming over here muling drugs, people, weapons, and can I actually get a bird's eye view of that? Can I step into the shoes and go, this is why they're doing that? I can actually hear their conversations, that they're getting money for their family or that they're running away from war. I think like it's more so as we get more hyper connected, we're actually going to get more divided until we use that connection to form understanding. And right now we aren't trying to really form the corporations, the news isn't trying to form understanding. So
Yeah. We are definitely going to get more divided. I mean, I always say I'm a huge fan of contemporary German philosopher Peter Sloterdijk and his, Bubbles trilogy, and the fracturing of the single globe, and the way we're all being sort of pushing each other around like bubbles and foam, and the immunological reactions that all of us are having as a result of exposure to so many different perspectives and the fracturing of the globes and spheres, etc. So
And
yeah,
what's the role? What's the role of the artist then? Kind of tying a lot of these threads together. What's the role of the artist in, it's funny because we're talking about two very different things. Like a lot of us in here are kind of echoing, like we want this to be good, but there's this one thread of like tolerance and how tolerant and how empathetic can we be. And on the other hand, there's also this sense of like we shouldn't be too streamlined as a people. Like we shouldn't be kind of socially chilled into a narrow band where we're afraid to say things. So there's kind of like two divergent threads related to the same like large kind of push. What role do artists play in bringing these ideas out, and what are the ways that you think will be effective as we move forward?
One of the ways is going back to the point that was raised earlier. I'm sorry I didn't see the name, but the person who brought up the point of experiencing an African American person's experience through VR. I think empathy and compassion are keys, but the interesting part of it is how do you evoke empathy and compassion? Like I don't set out to, let's say, create work that's empathic or promotes compassion. I just sort of set out to express my own sort of process as a human being. And what I think people have connected with in my work, and if you read their comments, it's their personal connection to that. So I think that deep inside, we all have these. I'm not sure how to describe it, but we have these currents that run deep inside each and every single one of us. And I would like to think that as artists, if we go that deep, if we hit those notes, or if you may, uh, we can connect to a much larger audience. In other words, there's a sort of surface layer of thoughts and ideas and cognition where a lot of this sort of conflict resides. Then there's layers underneath where it's more primal and instinctive and maybe even epigenetic. So, it's coming from ancestral memory, as some people have argued. And so there's that layer, but then there's a layer underneath all of that that's common to all humans. We share the same fears, the same love, the same longing. At the end of the day, in that layer, we are fundamentally the same. And so sometimes I think for artists, it's important to go as deep as they can, because that's when you can kind of sort of, it's like an elevator going down. It's like you can pass all those layers where all this stuff resides. And by hitting those deeper layers, you can connect to a larger audience because you're hitting that common denominator, which is the human condition, which we all share, Trump supporters and anti-Trump people. Doesn't make any difference. When we go that far down, we all share the same exact aspects of the human condition.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that to build off of that, I think that the idea you could put it in the idea of like building heaven on earth, or just peace for everyone, understanding that everyone around the earth level of consciousness, and that we can all be friendly, love each other, and work together. The important part of the artist is creating that symbolic representation of that reflects to us as we move through our lives. That very meaning. It reiterates that the interesting thing today is we see the division in symbols, like "Make America Great Again" gets a lot of people excited. It gets a lot of people literally, their blood pressure up, as it's been said. It's a symbol, right? But it carries so much meaning in a sparse, extreme meaning between two different groups of people. So more so in this kind of AR future that we're going towards, I think the artist now needs to move past their own contentions, their own view of reality. Like you said, take the elevator down deep into the soul and go, how can I create symbols that can dynamically adapt to all different types of people, give them the same expression of love and meaning, but out of that same anchor point. So, if it's it could be, "Make America Great Again" hat on one person's head looks like a, vote for, Bernie 2020 on another. It's just the idea like, oh, that person is, that hat doesn't, give me a negative response. It gives me the positive response. And yeah, that actually sounds, maybe a little scary to people, but at the same time, those breakdowns in understanding happen in a good conversation. In your passerby life of your, scrolling through the newsfeed, maybe it's important that you don't, get exposed to things that ruin your day. I don't know. That sounds actually really bad, but I could revisit that later. But yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I know because we started late, we're running up on what was going to be the kind of like end. So for that end, what I want to do is say like this will like wrap up the formal part of our conversation, so that anybody that needs to jump, no hard feelings, etc. Anybody who wants to stay and ask questions, I'll certainly stick around. Marjan and Aidan, if you can stick around,
Sure.
I'd love to, because I've been getting messages throughout that I think are really good points. So at this point, just feel free to kind of shout out any questions or thoughts.
I just wanted to say that, we should take a moment and marvel at how wonderful it is that we can share this experience. We're all around the globe. Some of us are on vacation in the wilderness. And, and we're still able to have this conversation. I think this is wonderful. And I just wanted to say thank you to Jesse for organizing this and speaking today. And Marjan and Aidan, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say, whenever Jesse invites me to talk, it always becomes like a major breakthrough. So I've always learned to say yes because I know it'll be like some amazing thing will happen.